Where's the top on the cycle? I don't know. Looking at last cycles, I mean, I would guess, I think 200 is just kind of easy. It feels to me like we will get there, no question. If the government has to capitulate and start printing money again, it'll go a lot higher than 200 on the cycle. To me, it's coming, but I don't know when, and that is the hard part. You know, I'm quite convinced these coins are going to $1 million and then someday $10 million. You know, very much like Sailor says, and you know, whether it happens in 3 years or 6 years, you know, it's the same place, and you know, we have long time preference. We can wait, so we'll get there.
Lawrence Lepard starts by discussing Bitcoin's price cycles, observing a pattern of upward movements followed by consolidation periods. He highlights how Bitcoin moved from 58 color to 70K, then to 100K, and suggests that the next leg up could take it to 130Ks or higher. Looking at historical cycles, Lepard conservatively estimates that $200 per Bitcoin is an easy target, though external factors such as monetary policy shifts and geopolitical events could push it even higher. He acknowledges the uncertainty of markets, but maintains confidence in Bitcoin's long-term value proposition.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
I think you can very conservatively. I mean, I was calling for 100. You could see, you know, I like the way it's progressing. It kind of moves up and then it builds a nice big base and flag, and then it moves up again and builds, you know, so we're at 58, and then we went to 70, and then we went to 100. And I think the next move is going to take us to 130 or something. And where's the top on the cycle? I don't know. Looking at last cycles, I mean, I would guess, I think 200 is just kind of easy. It feels to me like we will get there, no question. Does it go a lot beyond that? It could. I mean, you know, how many standard deviations above, you know, the 200-day moving average can it go, right? I mean, and obviously at any point in time, you know, different political events could shove it much higher. I mean, I think if the big print comes along, which is, we'll talk about that later, but you know, if the government has to capitulate and start printing money again, it'll go a lot higher than 200 on the cycle. And that's a possibility, but you know, there are never any certainties in this world. But I feel very good, you know, buying it right here. I think it will be higher. You know, I also think that when we get to the next peak, there'll probably be a correction. I don't think we're going to see any more of the 80 or 90% corrections, but a 30, 40, 50% correction would certainly be, you know, something I could see. So, I mean, my model is maybe it goes to 250 and then corrects back to 150 or something. We're kind of already in it, and actually lower rates would somewhat help. I mean, the lower rates, the greater problem there is that it will reignite inflation. I mean, I don't think they really have inflation tamed. My most recent quarterly letter just out talks about that. There's a lot of evidence they don't. Labor is getting more than 2% a year. You know, the longshoremen just got 10% for a year for 6 years. You know, agriculture commodities last year as a basket were up 20 some odd percent, which is why, you know, your food bills are higher. And yeah, no, to me, it's coming, but I don't know when. And that is the hard part. But for those of us who are in Bitcoin and who have kind of a HODL philosophy and have had it for years and years, you know, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, if we, you know, I'm quite convinced these coins are going to $1 million and then someday $10 million, you know, very much like Sailor says. And you know, whether it happens in 3 years or 6 years, you know, it's the same place, and you know, we have long time preference. We can wait, so we'll get there. 2 trillion on 900. That means 0.2% of the world's assets are in Bitcoin right now. 0.2%. Okay, so Bitcoin could go up 10x. Bitcoin could go from 0.2% to 2% of the world's assets. And it would still, you know, it would still represent a small fraction. I mean, you know, the amount of gold in the world, there's $18 trillion worth of gold in the world. So Bitcoin's got to go up 9x to, you know, to beat gold. And, you know, to me, it's just obvious that it's going to happen unless something in the trends that I'm looking at changes. And that's always possible. I mean, you never say never in the investment business, because, you know, you can believe something and be totally wrong. But, you know, it doesn't, I mean, I don't see anything to indicate that that's likely to happen. So, gosh, you know, and I think 2% is just a starting point. I mean, if this really is a sounder form of money than anything else out there, it will become, you know, the go-to long-term saving asset that just kind of compounds over time. You know, oh, it's 100,000, I've missed it. I know you bought it a lot cheaper. Gosh, good for you, but that's not so good for me. And I'm kind of like, well, if I told you, I had a story about this in the book. In Microsoft, I bought it. It went up 3 or 4x, and I needed some money, so I sold it. But it continued to go up another 1,000x. Do you know what I mean? And so, if in 5 years Bitcoin's $1 million, I think that's very doable. And in 15 years, Bitcoin's $10 million. I think that's very doable. Are you going to care that you paid 90 or 110 for it? I mean, I don't think so. And that's the way you got to look at it. I mean, I get a kick out of, talk to Max Kaiser, and he says, yeah, I felt like I was overpaying because Trace was getting it 25 cents and I had to pay $1. Do you know what I mean? I mean, everybody feels like they're overpaying. And that's just the nature. You got to understand what it is. There's a fixed supply of it. So it's always going to feel expensive, because, as he says, it's going up forever, Laura. And so you just buy it and sit back. And I mean, the toughest part, and I talk about this in the book too, is, to people who don't really fundamentally understand what it is. And I had some people I put into it, kind of at the tops before the SBF episode at 50 or 60, and they were buying it. And it went down to 15 because of SBF and, rate hikes and all the other stuff. And they said, oh shit, I made a mistake. And they blew it out, right? They sold it. And that's the toughest part. I think it's incumbent upon all of us Bitcoiners to help the people that we're bringing along with us to understand that you've got to view this as if it goes down 50%, I don't care. Because I have a 5, 10, 15, 20-year window here. And I know, everyone who's held it for 4 years is in the black. And I think that pattern will continue.
Lepard recounts stories of past investment opportunities, likening Bitcoin to Amazon, Google, and Microsoft in their early days. Many investors sold too soon, missing out on exponential gains. He warns against capping one's upside potential and stresses the importance of patience. Holding Bitcoin for a decade or more, he argues, will likely result in life-changing wealth. He also notes that even owning a single Bitcoin will be a game changer for future generations. He shares an anecdote about a truck driver who thanked him for his Bitcoin insights, explaining that even a modest investment had significantly improved his financial situation.
That's why, when we sit here and we look at, and you hear sailors say $13 million Bitcoin, or I'm saying $10 million Bitcoin, and people just look at me like I'm nuts, like you're out of your mind. That's never going to happen. And I'm absolutely sure it's going to happen. I'm completely convinced of it, but people think I'm crazy, and it's just because of the model that I'm using, and I'm comparing it to these other network businesses and what they did in terms of value growth. Bitcoin is just crushing every other alternative investment. So if you're in the investment management business and you're not aware of Bitcoin, considering Bitcoin, saying, hey, maybe you should have a little allocation to it. I mean, look, I understand why people are concerned and afraid about it. In fact, there's a chapter in the book called Skepticism that talks about all the FUD that people have thrown up, and I've tried to swat those things away. Yeah, TradFi, I think, it's, they're going to be forced. I mean, when you're performing so much better just by having a little bit of Bitcoin in your portfolio than the person who just owns the S&P and doesn't have the Bitcoin, that's their job. Their job is to get good performance for their clients. And so, at some point, they're going to slowly but surely all be forced to wake up and recognize that they're not doing their job if they don't allocate something into this asset. Again, the book is trying to push that, that narrative and help them to understand it. And I try and do it, in a reasonably kind way. The only part of the book that's kind of unkind is I'm pretty harsh on the central bankers, because they've, in my view, they really are they're at the scene of the crime, and they're the arrogance of the central bankers is part of how we got into this mess. A large part of how we got into this mess. Yeah, some more nation states will announce that they're stacking it. The U.S. just, as you saw, Trump just signed an executive order talking about creating a digital reserve. I wish he'd called it a Bitcoin reserve, but he had to give a nod to all the other coins that have supported him in his election. I think, it will get onto bank balance sheets. It's just, I think once you start to realize what it is, you kind of FOMO into it because you just don't want to miss it. I remember listening to Saylor talking about how when he first found it, he was like, oh my God, I got to buy as much of this thing as I can before it gets away from me. And of course, he still keeps buying it, even though it's higher. And I think, when people have that quote unquote aha moment, and more of them have it, Samson's not wrong. We will be $1 million a coin. It's, and that's why, I don't, that's why I'm not going to sell any, and that's why, don't cap your upside. You just don't know what's going to happen. So but you've got to always be mentally prepared for the drawdown. We could be at 200 in a year, which seems very likely to me. At the end of this year, we'd be at 200. And we could all be feeling great, think we're geniuses, and, look at the numbers and say, gosh, I'm a lot richer than I used to be. And something could happen and we could have a 50% drawdown easily. And, that would be a great buying opportunity in my view. But, you'd have to have some cash to buy it with coming from some other source. But, I certainly wouldn't sell it there. I mean, I view this as something I'm going to hold for decades. And, perhaps someday when I retire and I need, it doesn't produce a yield, and I don't really believe in most of the yield producing products, and I'm not sure I really even want to borrow against it. I imagine what I would do is just say, okay, I'll sell 1% of what I hold or whatever I need to cover my annual expenses. And, at the age I'm at, it's unlikely I'll run out of money before, time catches up with me. So, it is what it is. It's an unbelievable opportunity. I mean, the book talks about this too. There's, all the money and the great wealth in this world has been built in asymmetric situations that don't have a capped upside. All you can lose is what you put in. And this is the most asymmetric situation I've seen in 40 some odd years of investing. I mean, I saw some other ones, I blew it. Google was one, and Amazon was one, and so forth. But this is just as good, in my opinion, perhaps better. And that asymmetry, it just creates wealth like nothing else. In 10 years or 20 years, I think, it's going to be noticeable whose families, what people own Bitcoin and which people didn't. Even just having a single coin is going to be a life-changing event for people. It's fun. I've been doing this for a long time now. I'm doing pods, making a lot of noise, and I'm a loudmouth on Twitter and all that shit. And it's fun because I get these DMs from guys, people I have no idea who they are, but they're like, geez, man, I listened to you 3 or 4 years ago and I bought some of this, and it's not a big number, but boy, it's had a huge impact on my family. Because a lot of these people are buying at 20,000. Well, they haven't seen investments go up 5x, in their lifetime. I had a guy who was a truck driver stop me in a Whole Foods and, came over and said, "Are you Larry?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I've been listening to your pods for years, and I've been stacking like crazy, and this shit's really working." I was like, it made my day, right? This guy's not a wealthy guy, but he understands sound money, and he decided to to buy sound money. And so, that's the thing. I would just encourage everyone who's skeptical, everybody who doesn't like it, you got to take the time to really understand what it is. It's an invention, and it'd be like saying, well, I don't believe in airplane flight. The planes are flying, yeah. And in the early days, it was dangerous for sure. A lot of people got killed in airplanes in the 20s and 30s, but ultimately they ironed out the problems, and now you can fly all around the world pretty safely and inexpensively, relatively. So, and that's kind of the same thing here. We got problems to iron out. I'm kind of frustrated and underwhelmed by how well the Lightning stuff has developed. For small stuff, it works great. I try to send a multi-$1,000 transaction. It's kind of slow and somewhat unreliable for bigger transactions. So, the layer 2 development has to improve. It will, I'm sure. In that respect, it reminds me of the internet. The early days, the internet was really clunky. It was dial-up. It was green screen. We didn't have Windows. It was there was almost like, why am I even on this thing? But you could see that you could see that they would fix the things that were wrong with it. And I think that's what you've got here too. I think these things will get fixed.
While bullish on Bitcoin's future, Lepard acknowledges some of the challenges it still faces. He expresses frustration with the slow development of the Lightning Network for larger transactions, comparing it to the early days of the Internet when things were clunky and inefficient. However, he is confident that the ecosystem will continue to improve, making Bitcoin even more practical for everyday use. He reiterates that Bitcoin is an invention, not just an investment. Dismissing Bitcoin today, he argues, is like dismissing airplanes in the early 1900s. Just because the technology is still evolving doesn't mean it won't revolutionize the world. Please like and subscribe.